Psychic phenomena, in the light of the Grail Message. Foreword. The fascination with the unseen. From the earliest days of human history, mankind has been irresistibly drawn toward the unseen. Wherever ordinary perception ends, curiosity awakens. What lies behind appearances? What forces move silently beneath visible life? What powers exist beyond the grasp of the senses? This longing to penetrate the invisible has given rise to myths, religions, secret teachings, and, more recently, what is popularly called psychic phenomena. At its root, this fascination is not evil. It springs from a dim remembrance that human life is more than flesh and matter. Deep within, the human spirit knows that creation is layered, that existence does not end where the eyes can no longer see. Yet when this healthy intuition is not guided by law and clarity, it easily degenerates into hunger for the extraordinary, the sensational, and the spectacular. The unseen then becomes not a realm of reverence, but a playground for imagination, ambition, and vanity. In this confusion, spiritual insight is often mistaken for psychic power. Quiet inner perception is confused with dramatic experiences. Lawful intuition is overshadowed by visions, trances, voices, predictions, and displays that promise excitement and special status. Many begin to measure spiritual worth by how much one sees, feels, or can demonstrate, rather than by how uprightly one lives. Thus the extraordinary replaces the essential, and sensation displaces responsibility. The Grail Message brings decisive clarity to this disorder. It shows that true perception is never detached from moral maturity, inner purity, and lawful living. It teaches that nothing of value in creation exists for entertainment, curiosity, or egoistic display. Every ability, every perception, every form of sensitivity stands under law and serves development, not spectacle. Where law is ignored, confusion must arise, even if experiences feel vivid or convincing. Psychic phenomena, as popularly understood today, often emerge precisely where this lawfulness is absent. They thrive in emotional excess, unbridled imagination, fear of the unknown, or the craving to be special. They promise shortcuts to wisdom while bypassing character development. They offer experiences without demanding responsibility. In this way, they become spiritually dangerous, not because the unseen is unreal, but because it is approached without reverence, discipline, and humility. The Grail Message restores the proper order. It teaches that the unseen is not meant to be conquered, exploited, or displayed. It is meant to be respected. True spiritual perception unfolds quietly as a consequence of inner alignment, never as a goal in itself. Where clarity reigns, there is no urge to astonish others, no need to prove insight, no hunger for phenomena. There is calm certainty, groundedness, and a deep sense of responsibility for every thought, feeling, and action. This book therefore does not seek to deny that unseen realities exist. On the contrary, it seeks to rescue truth from distortion. It separates lawful perception from illusion, intuition from imagination, spiritual maturity from psychic sensationalism. It addresses those who are sincerely seeking, yet feel uneasy amid the confusion, those who sense that much of what is called psychic does not bring peace, clarity, or moral strength. Above all, this work aims to guide the reader back to the solid ground of reality. Not away from the world, but more deeply into it. Not toward extraordinary experiences, but toward extraordinary responsibility. For the highest spiritual attainment is not the ability to see beyond the veil, but the strength to live uprightly within it. In the light of the Grail Message, fascination gives way to understanding, curiosity yields to reverence, and illusion dissolves before law. What remains is a human being standing firmly in creation, awake, responsible, and at peace, no longer chasing the unseen, but serving life as it truly is. Introduction. What people think psychic phenomena are. When the word psychic is mentioned, the human imagination immediately fills the space with striking images and dramatic claims. Telepathy is thought to be the ability to read another's thoughts. Clairvoyance is imagined as seeing hidden events or distant places. Precognition is believed to be knowledge of the future before it unfolds. Mediumship is presented as communication with the departed or unseen beings. In popular culture and modern spirituality, these ideas are often grouped together as signs of higher evolution, spiritual advancement, or special divine favor. Yet beneath this surface fascination lies deep confusion. Most people do not pause to ask what actually perceives, by what law such perception would occur, or whether these experiences arise lawfully or unlawfully. Psychic phenomena are usually approached as abilities to be acquired, activated, or trained, much like skills, rather than as byproducts of inner maturity and lawful alignment. This misunderstanding turns what should be a sober subject of responsibility into a marketplace of excitement, fear, and illusion. Many misconceptions arise from desire. The desire to be special, to stand out, or to possess secret knowledge tempts human beings to interpret inner impressions as extraordinary powers. Others are driven by fear, fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of meaninglessness, and seek reassurance through supposed psychic insights. Still others fall into error through misunderstanding, mistaking emotional sensitivity, imagination, intuition, or coincidence for spiritual perception. In all cases, the intellect rushes to label experiences without first examining their origin or lawfulness. The danger here is not merely intellectual error, it is spiritual derailment. When imagination is elevated to truth, the human being begins to build inner worlds that have no firm connection to reality. Emotional impressions are taken as messages, fantasies as revelations, and chance occurrences as destiny. Instead of growing inwardly, the seeker becomes entangled in self-created images that slowly replace humility, clarity, and responsibility. What appears as spiritual awakening often becomes subtle self-deception. A particularly harmful error is equating talent or sensitivity with spiritual attainment. Some people are naturally receptive, emotionally open, or imaginative. Others possess keen observation or intuitive quickness. These traits are not spiritual height, they are neutral tools that can serve either clarity or confusion. When such traits are admired without discipline or moral grounding, they inflate the ego and obscure the true task of human development, purification of thought, feeling, and will. The Grail Message brings decisive correction here. It does not deny inner perception, nor does it ridicule human experiences beyond the physical. Instead, it restores law to the subject. It teaches that perception without responsibility is dangerous, that insight without humility is distortion, and that anything not aligned with divine law cannot lead upward. True spiritual perception is never sensational. It does not seek attention, prove superiority, or bypass earthly duty. It serves life quietly, strengthens responsibility, and deepens reverence for creation. From this perspective, psychic phenomena are not signs of advancement to be chased, but effects that may arise, or not arise, depending on inner maturity. They are never goals. The human being does not grow by seeing more, but by becoming more upright. Where clarity of inner life exists, lawful perception may be granted as needed. Where disorder reigns, any psychic experience becomes a source of confusion rather than light. This book therefore begins by dismantling the popular picture of psychic phenomena, not to strip life of wonder, but to restore wonder to its rightful place. It seeks to free the earnest seeker from fear, fascination, and false hope, and to redirect attention toward what truly matters: lawful living, conscious responsibility, and inner purification. Only on this foundation can genuine understanding arise. Without it, psychic ideas remain shadows that distract the human spirit from its real task. Thus, before proceeding further, one must release the expectation of gaining abilities or extraordinary experiences. What lies ahead is something far more demanding and far more liberating: clarity instead of mystery, responsibility instead of spectacle, and truth instead of illusion. Part 1. The Foundation: the Human Spirit and Lawful Perception. Before psychic phenomena can be understood, they must be removed from curiosity, fear, pride, and fantasy and returned to their lawful place within creation. What humanity calls psychic is not extraordinary power, but misunderstood perception, often distorted by desire and ego. This foundation is essential. Without it, every discussion of psychic ability becomes dangerous, misleading, or self-deceptive. Chapter 1. The Human Spirit as Essence. The human being is not defined by the body, nor by the brain, nor by emotions, nor by mental abilities. At the core of the human being stands the spirit, which alone is the true essence. All perception, physical or beyond the physical, can only arise through this spirit, never apart from it. Psychic phenomena are often spoken of as special talents, rare gifts, or inherited abilities. This framing is already false. Nothing that touches perception exists outside the spirit, and nothing lawful is detached from responsibility. Any form of perception that arises without spiritual maturity is therefore incomplete, unstable, or distorted. The spirit does not seek phenomena. It seeks alignment with law. Where alignment exists, perception may awaken naturally, quietly, and without spectacle. Where alignment is absent, attempts to force perception lead to illusion, self-deception, or influence from lower fine material realms. The Grail Message makes clear that the spirit does not use powers. It radiates. What the human being receives depends on inner clarity, humility, and purity of will. Psychic phenomena, when chased as power, already stand outside this law. True perception never elevates the personality. It deepens responsibility. Chapter 2. Soul, Consciousness, and Perception. Much confusion about psychic phenomena arises because the soul, consciousness, and spirit are treated as interchangeable. They are not. The spirit is the eternal essence. The soul is the fine material garment formed through experiences, feelings, and inclinations. Consciousness is the waking interface through which the human being interprets impressions. Perception does not occur directly in consciousness. It must pass through the soul, which colors it according to purity or distortion. Thus, two people may receive similar impressions but interpret them in completely different ways. When the soul is restless, emotionally charged, fearful, ambitious, or curious, impressions become exaggerated or false. This is where imagination disguises itself as perception. The individual feels convinced, even overwhelmed, yet remains inwardly unanchored. Lawful perception is quiet, sober, and restrained. It never demands attention. It does not insist on interpretation. It carries no emotional intoxication. Where excitement, urgency, or superiority appear, clarity has already been lost. The Grail Message corrects the dangerous belief that vivid inner experience equals truth. Intensity is not authenticity. Only lawfulness determines validity. Chapter 3. Anchoring in the Body and Earthly Life. The human being is not accidentally bound to the body. This binding is lawful and protective. Earthly life is not an obstacle to spiritual development, it is its appointed field. Psychic phenomena often flourish where rejection of earthly responsibility exists. The individual seeks perception instead of fulfillment of duty, escape instead of mastery of life, sensation instead of service. This imbalance weakens grounding and opens the soul to unstable impressions. True spiritual development strengthens presence in earthly life. The more mature the spirit, the more reliable, practical, and balanced the human being becomes. Any ability that pulls a person away from daily responsibilities stands in opposition to law. The Grail Message emphasizes that no true awakening removes a human being from the earth. It places him more firmly upon it. Grounding is not limitation, it is protection. Where psychic interest weakens bodily presence, discipline, or clarity of thought, degeneration has already begun, no matter how spiritual it appears. Chapter 4. Law and Responsibility is the basis of insight. Nothing can be perceived lawfully without responsibility. This is the dividing line between true perception and psychic misuse. Perception is never given for entertainment, curiosity, superiority, or control. It arises only where the individual has proven reliability in thought, feeling, and action. Even then, it appears only to the degree necessary, not beyond. Psychic phenomena pursued for personal gain violate this law. Whether for prediction, influence, reassurance, or power, such use creates inner imbalance and attracts deceptive impressions. The Grail Message restores the forgotten truth. Responsibility precedes insight. Where responsibility is absent, perception is withdrawn or distorted. Where humility exists, perception remains limited but clear. True insight increases obligation. It never offers advantage. Chapter 5. The Limits of Human Perception. One of the gravest errors surrounding psychic phenomena is the belief that everything can be known. This belief alone opens the door to illusion. Creation is layered. Each layer has lawful boundaries. Human perception, no matter how refined, cannot cross these boundaries at will. What lies beyond lawful reach becomes speculation, fantasy, or distortion. The Grail Message does not deny perception, it defines its limits. True guidance is always fragmentary, never total. It points, warns, or clarifies, but never replaces responsibility, decision, or conscience. Uncontrolled psychic experiences often overwhelm the individual because they lack structure, lawfulness, and grounding. What feels expansive is often dissolving clarity. Where law is honored, perception remains modest. Where law is ignored, experience multiplies, but truth diminishes. Closing note to Part 1. Psychic phenomena are not signs of advancement. They are byproducts that may arise, or may not, depending on the soul's maturity. What matters is not what one sees, senses, or feels, but how one lives. Only a human being anchored in humility, responsibility, and service can approach perception without danger. All else leads not to enlightenment, but to confusion. Part 2. The origin of psychic mystification. How illusion replaced lawful understanding. Chapter 6. Ancient myths and esoteric traditions. Symbolism mistaken for literal psychic ability. From the earliest civilizations, humanity attempted to express experiences beyond the physical senses through symbolic language. Myths, temple imagery, and initiation stories were never meant to be read as literal manuals for psychic powers. They were pictures, shaped to help immature minds grasp invisible laws. Over time, however, reverence for symbolism weakened. What once pointed inward toward responsibility and purification was gradually interpreted outwardly as special abilities. The priest who saw beyond was no longer understood as one who lived inwardly purified, but as one who possessed supernatural sight. The initiate's inner awakening became confused with secret techniques. Thus, esoteric traditions slowly drifted from lawful preparation of character toward fascination with phenomena. Knowledge once guarded to protect humanity from misuse was fragmented, copied, and distorted. Without the ethical discipline that originally accompanied it, symbolism hardened into superstition. The Grail Message restores clarity here. No symbol grants power, only inner alignment with law opens perception, and even then, perception is never an entitlement. When symbolism is literalized, illusion replaces wisdom, and humanity begins chasing shadows instead of maturing inwardly. Chapter 7. Dreams, Trances, and Altered States. How misinterpreted inner images create the illusion of psychic power. Dreams and trance-like states are natural human experiences. In sleep, the intellect loosens its grip, allowing subconscious impressions to surface. In emotional or physical exhaustion, inner images may arise with unusual vividness. These states, however, are not gateways to higher authority. The error begins when intensity is mistaken for truth. A powerful dream feels meaningful, a vivid image feels real. Without grounding, the mind assumes that clarity equals accuracy. From this assumption arises the belief, I have seen beyond. Yet inner images are shaped by memory, desire, fear, and expectation. They are subjective reflections, not objective insight. When such experiences are elevated without examination, the individual begins to believe they possess psychic ability. The Grail Message corrects this sharply. Perception that bypasses responsibility is unreliable. True insight brings sobriety, humility, and increased duty, not excitement or self-importance. Altered states do not refine perception, they weaken the anchors that protect clarity. What is seen without discipline becomes distortion. The lawful path does not loosen consciousness, it sharpens it. Chapter 8. Emotional Desire and Spiritual Vanity. Ego-driven attempts to see or influence beyond lawful limits. One of the strongest roots of psychic mystification is emotional hunger. The desire to be special, to know more than others, to feel chosen, these longings easily disguise themselves as spiritual seeking. When perception becomes a means of self-affirmation, it immediately falls under the dominion of ego. The individual no longer asks, am I living uprightly? But instead asks, what can I see? From this inversion arises vanity. Measuring worth by experiences. Ranking people by sensitivity. Believing insight elevates status. The Grail Message exposes this deception. True perception never elevates the ego. It makes the bearer quieter, more careful, and more responsible. Psychic vanity seeks spectacle, lawful perception seeks service. One expands the self-image, the other dissolves it. Where vanity rules, distortion follows, because perception bends toward desire, not truth. Chapter 9. Fear, Curiosity, and Fascination with the Unknown. How dread or desire leads to misperception. Fear and curiosity are twin forces that pull humanity toward psychic fascination. Fear asks, what will happen? Curiosity asks, what lies beyond? When these urges are not governed by trust in law, they become doorways to illusion. Fear-driven seeking longs for reassurance. It looks for signs, predictions, and hidden knowledge to feel safe. Curiosity-driven seeking craves stimulation and novelty. Both bypass the simple demand of the present, live rightly now. The Grail Message makes clear that what is unknown is not meant to be invaded. Creation reveals only what the human being can responsibly carry. When curiosity pushes beyond maturity, perception fractures. Thus many psychic impressions arise not from insight, but from anxiety projected outward. The unknown becomes populated by imagined forces, messages, and warnings. The mind fills silence with invention. Lawful spiritual life replaces fascination with trust. What must be known will come in its time. Everything else is distraction. Chapter 10. Modern Movements and Misleading Practices. Commercialized, psychic, teachings and the confusion of entertainment with truth. In the modern age, psychic mystification has been repackaged as industry. Workshops promise awakening, courses sell intuition, platforms reward dramatic claims. What was once superstition is now marketed spirituality. Here, psychic phenomena are no longer rare illusions but mass-produced narratives. Sensitivity becomes a brand, experiences become proof, followers replace discernment. The danger is profound. When illusion is normalized, clarity becomes suspect. When noise dominates, quiet truth is dismissed. The Grail Message stands in direct opposition to this trend. It teaches that nothing true needs advertising. Lawful perception does not seek audiences. It works silently, strengthening responsibility, not dependence. Entertainment excites, truth stabilizes. One scatters the inner life, the other gathers it. Humanity must choose which it will follow. Closing reflection of Part 2. Psychic mystification did not arise from evil intent, but from misdirected longing, the longing to understand without transforming, to see without serving, to know without becoming responsible. The Grail Message does not deny inner perception. It rescues it from misuse. Where illusion promises power, law demands maturity. Where fantasy multiplies experiences, truth deepens character. Where mystification escapes the world, law anchors the human being firmly within it. Only from that grounding can true insight arise, quiet, sober, and free from self-deception. Part 3. What actually happens? Removing illusion through clear recognition. Chapter 11. Inner perception versus outer reality. How thought, memory, and intuition create seeming phenomena. One of the greatest sources of confusion around psychic phenomena arises from the failure to distinguish between inner perception and outer reality. Humanity often assumes that because an experience feels vivid, intense, or meaningful, it must correspond to an external occurrence. This assumption is false. Inner perception belongs to the realm of consciousness, thought, memory, and intuition. It is inwardly experienced and shaped by the individual's state, maturity, and clarity. Outer reality, however, is governed by law, structure, and objective existence independent of personal feeling. Thought has the power to create inner images. Memory can replay impressions with striking realism. Imagination can combine fragments of experience into scenes that feel new and revelatory. When emotional intensity accompanies these processes, the experience is often mistaken for a psychic event. The Grail Message clarifies that inner vividness is not proof of outer truth. An image perceived inwardly does not indicate that something external was seen, contacted, or influenced. Without this distinction, the human being becomes vulnerable to self-deception, attributing authority to experiences that possess none. True spiritual maturity begins when a person learns to calmly observe inner impressions without immediately interpreting them as messages, powers, or signs. Only through such restraint does clarity arise. Chapter 12. Radiational Influence of the Spirit. How actions and intentions affect the environment. What people often describe as psychic influence is, in reality, radiational effect. Every human being radiates according to his or her inner condition. Thoughts, feelings, and intentions generate currents that extend outward and affect surroundings, not through mystical control, but through lawful interaction. This influence is not selective or consciously directed at will. It is automatic, constant, and impartial. A person radiating peace brings calm. One radiating unrest spreads tension. Uprightness strengthens environments. Deceit poisons them. This is law, not psychic ability. Misunderstanding arises when individuals feel the effect of another's radiation and attribute it to psychic transmission. In truth, no message was sent. No mind was read. The effect occurred because law binds similar vibrations together. The Grail Message restores dignity to this process by removing spectacle. Influence is not a power to wield, but a responsibility to bear. One cannot hide inner condition behind outer silence. Radiation proceeds regardless. Thus, the real question is not what can I perceive or influence, but what do I radiate through my way of being. Here lies the true spiritual task. Chapter 13. Intuition is lawful guidance. True spiritual insight without sensationalism. Intuition is often confused with psychic ability. Yet intuition is neither dramatic nor intrusive. It does not announce itself with visions, voices, or predictions. It arises quietly, clearly, and lawfully when the human being is inwardly aligned. True intuition does not violate responsibility or replace thinking. It supports right action by offering inner certainty where intellect reaches its limit. It never flatters ego, demands attention, or seeks admiration. Psychic confusion arises when people attempt to produce intuition rather than receive it. Forcing perception, seeking signs, or craving extraordinary experience blocks intuition instead of awakening it. The Grail Message teaches that intuition blossoms only where humility, purity of motive, and service prevail. It cannot coexist with curiosity, ambition, or fear. Where intuition is genuine, it strengthens grounded living rather than drawing attention away from it. Thus, intuition is not a special faculty possessed by a few, but a lawful outcome of inner order available to all who live uprightly. Chapter 14. Why psychic ability cannot be forced. The danger of attempting uncontrolled perception. Many who pursue psychic phenomena attempt to force perception through techniques, rituals, substances, or prolonged emotional states. This is one of the gravest errors in spiritual seeking. Perception that arises outside lawfulness does not elevate, it destabilizes. Forced sensitivity weakens grounding, blurs discernment, and opens the individual to confusion rather than clarity. What is perceived under such conditions is unreliable, fragmented, and often misleading. The Grail Message explains that creation itself prevents unlawful access. Where boundaries appear, they are protective, not restrictive. Attempts to bypass them lead not to higher truth, but to lower impressions that mimic significance while lacking substance. True perception is never wrested from the unseen. It is entrusted to those who are inwardly mature enough to carry it without misuse. Thus, the desire to have psychic ability reveals misunderstanding. The lawful path asks instead, am I inwardly ordered enough to be entrusted with deeper insight? Chapter 15. Conscious presence is the basis of all insight. The only lawful point of influence is here and now. All genuine insight arises from conscious presence. Not from altered states, future visions, or unseen realms, but from full wakefulness in the present moment. The human being stands at a single point of responsibility, now. Here alone can thought be purified, feeling disciplined, and action aligned with law. Any pursuit that draws attention away from this point weakens the soul rather than expanding it. Psychic fascination tempts humanity to look elsewhere for meaning, hoping to bypass the work of living rightly. The Grail Message corrects this by restoring focus to the present as the only creative point. When a person is fully present, awake in thought, sincere in feeling, upright in action, perception clarifies naturally. Nothing mystical is required, nothing dramatic occurs, yet truth becomes accessible. Thus, the highest spiritual state is not seeing beyond the world, but standing rightly within it. Part 4. The Law of Protection and Consequence. Chapter 16. Lawful Limits of Human Perception. Why creation prevents misuse or reckless exploration. Human perception is not unlimited, nor was it ever intended to be. In the Grail Message, everything within creation functions according to precise and benevolent laws. These laws are not restrictions imposed to frustrate mankind, they are protective boundaries designed to preserve clarity, stability, and development. Perception beyond the physical is only lawful when it arises naturally from inner purity, humility, and responsibility. It is never granted to satisfy curiosity, hunger for power, or the desire to stand out as gifted. Where such motives exist, perception is automatically blocked or distorted. This is not punishment, it is protection. The human spirit is still in development. To expose it prematurely to impressions from fine material realms would overwhelm it, confuse judgment, and weaken grounding in earthly life. Therefore, creation limits perception until the individual has matured inwardly enough to bear responsibility for what is perceived. Modern fascination with psychic powers ignores this law. It assumes that seeing more equals knowing more. In truth, lawful knowledge increases only when character deepens. Without inner order, expanded perception does not enlighten, it destabilizes. Creation does not reward intrusion. It responds only to harmony. Chapter 17. Risk of disturbance from lower realms. How ungrounded curiosity attracts misleading impressions. When a human being seeks psychic experience without lawful preparation, perception does not open upward, it sinks downward. This is one of the gravest misunderstandings in modern spirituality. Lower fine material realms are closest to the physical world and are filled with fragmented impressions, emotional residues, and confused forms created by human thought and desire. These regions are not sources of wisdom. They mirror disorder, not truth. Ungrounded curiosity acts like a magnet. It attracts impressions that appear vivid, emotional, and convincing, yet lack clarity and moral elevation. Such experiences often feel powerful, which is why they deceive. But power without light is not guidance, it is disturbance. The Grail Message makes clear that true perception is calm, sober, and strengthening. Anything that excites, frightens, intoxicates, or inflates the ego does not come from higher realms. Many who believe they are receiving psychic messages are, in reality, interacting with reflections of their own inner unrest. Without grounding, the boundary between perception and imagination collapses, leading to confusion that can persist for years. Law protects by withholding, not by indulging. Chapter 18. Obsession, Addiction, and Misuse. When abilities are pursued for excitement or self-aggrandizement, the pursuit of psychic phenomena easily becomes addictive. Each experience creates hunger for another, stronger one. What began as curiosity turns into dependency. The individual no longer seeks truth but sensation. This is especially dangerous because the intellect may justify obsession as spiritual growth. In reality, such fixation drains vitality, weakens willpower, and gradually detaches the person from practical responsibility. According to the Grail Message, any ability sought for personal elevation, recognition, or control inevitably leads downward. Not because abilities are evil, but because motive determines outcome. Where ego rules, law withdraws. Misuse also affects others. Those who present themselves as psychic authorities often spread fear, dependency, or false hope. They may unintentionally influence others away from personal responsibility and inner development. True spiritual maturity never produces addiction. It produces stability, clarity, and peace. Chapter 19. Grounding is the true safeguard. Spiritual maturity requires stability, not escape. Grounding is not a limitation, it is a safeguard. Earthly life is not a distraction from spirituality, it is its testing ground. The Grail Message emphasizes that the human being is placed in physical existence for a purpose, to develop will, responsibility, and discernment through action. Any teaching that encourages withdrawal from life in favor of psychic exploration is fundamentally misguided. Grounded individuals fulfill their duties quietly. They think clearly, act responsibly, and remain inwardly awake. Their spirituality expresses itself through conduct, not phenomena. Such individuals may possess fine perception, but it remains secondary, restrained, and subordinate to service. They do not seek it, advertise it, or depend on it. Where grounding is strong, deception loses power. Chapter 20. Growth through service and upright action. True phenomena as lawful consequence of conduct. The only phenomena that matter in creation are those that arise lawfully from upright living. Peace, clarity, strength of will, and intuitive certainty are not dramatic, but they are real. The Grail Message teaches that radiational effects flow from every thought, feeling, and action. When these are pure, ordered, and responsible, they influence the environment far more deeply than any psychic display. True insight does not announce itself. It guides silently. It does not impress others, it strengthens them. Those who live uprightly do not need psychic confirmation. Their certainty grows from alignment with law. Their future unfolds without fear, because nothing within them seeks shortcuts or escapes. This is the end of illusion and the beginning of real spiritual life. Part 5. The True Psychic Experience. What Humanity Mistakes for Power. Chapter 21. Development of Consciousness, not Sensation. Spiritual maturity is real movement. The greatest error surrounding so-called psychic phenomena is the belief that spiritual advancement must be accompanied by unusual sensations. Humanity has learned to equate inner growth with extraordinary experiences, visions, voices, impressions, or heightened perception. In doing so, it has overlooked the quiet, lawful development that alone carries value. True spiritual development does not announce itself through spectacle. It unfolds inwardly, through the gradual refinement of consciousness. This refinement expresses itself as increased clarity, greater responsibility, deeper humility, and steadier moral strength. Where these are absent, no experience, however vivid, can be considered spiritual. The Grail Message makes clear that evolution occurs through alignment with law, not through excitement. Consciousness matures when the human being learns to think clearly, feel purely, and act uprightly. This maturation is subtle. It often brings greater calm rather than heightened sensation. It reduces restlessness rather than feeding curiosity. Sensation belongs to the nerves and the intellect. Consciousness belongs to the spirit. Sensation fades quickly and demands repetition. Consciousness deepens quietly and endures. Therefore, those who chase psychic experiences remain dependent on stimulation, while those who develop consciousness grow inwardly independent. True movement is not outward exploration into unseen realms. It is inward ascent toward greater responsibility. Where consciousness matures, perception becomes sober, restrained, and lawful. Where sensation dominates, confusion, pride, and instability follow. The true psychic experience, therefore, is not something felt, but something become. Chapter 22. Radiational influence replaces travel or seeing. Effects of the soul's lawful activity on others. Human beings do not need to see beyond the physical to exert influence. Every thought, every feeling, every decision radiates outward according to its quality. This radiational effect is lawful, constant, and unavoidable. It requires no special ability and no altered state. What many call psychic influence is, in truth, the natural effect of inner condition. A person filled with calm clarity brings calm into a room without effort. A person dominated by unrest disturbs others without speaking. These effects are not mysterious. They are lawful consequences of inner radiation. The Grail Message clarifies that influence travels, not the human being. No soul journeys outward to act elsewhere. Rather, the radiations of thought and will flow through creation according to their nature. Pure motives strengthen and uplift. Impure motives burden and darken. Those who attempt to send thoughts or exert psychic control misunderstand this law. Conscious manipulation belongs to the intellect and often carries coercive intent. Lawful influence arises naturally from inner state, not from directed effort. This explains why truly upright individuals often influence many without ever intending to do so. Their presence alone carries weight because it is aligned. Conversely, those who attempt to wield psychic power often disturb rather than help, because their radiations are mixed with desire, pride, or fear. The true psychic effect, therefore, is not vision, projection, or transmission. It is the quiet, lawful impact of a purified inner life. Chapter 23. Responsibility is the measure of power. Uprightness, not curiosity, determines influence. In creation, power is never given without responsibility. Where responsibility is lacking, perception is restricted by law. This is not punishment, but protection. Humanity errs when it assumes that knowledge or perception grants authority. In truth, authority arises only from inner maturity. A person who cannot govern thought, feeling, and action cannot be entrusted with greater perception. Any opening beyond this level would lead to misuse or confusion. The Grail Message teaches that responsibility precedes insight. The more upright a human being becomes in daily life, the more reliable and sober their perception grows. Not broader, but clearer. Not more spectacular, but more accurate. Those who seek psychic abilities often seek power without responsibility. They desire to know without serving, to see without correcting themselves, to influence without accountability. This imbalance inevitably leads to distortion. True power is the power to act rightly under pressure. It is the power to remain truthful when falsehood would be easier. It is the power to serve without recognition. Such power radiates strength far beyond what psychic displays could ever achieve. Where responsibility governs life, influence grows naturally. Where curiosity governs life, instability follows. Creation responds not to fascination, but to faithfulness. Chapter 24. Continuation beyond physical life. How lawful influence persists after death. The end of earthly life does not grant new abilities. It reveals what has already been developed. No human being becomes wiser, purer, or more powerful simply by leaving the physical body. What continues beyond death is the inner condition, the maturity, clarity, and responsibility cultivated during earthly life. Radiations do not cease. They continue according to the same laws that governed them before. Thus, influence persists, but only in alignment with what has been lawfully acquired. Those who lived restlessly, chasing sensation, do not awaken to sudden insight. They awaken to limitation. Those who lived uprightly awaken to clarity. This continuity exposes the futility of pursuing psychic experiences for their own sake. Earthly life is the training ground. Here, resistance exists. Here, decisions carry weight. Here, responsibility can be proven. Beyond the physical, development continues only on the foundation already laid. Therefore, those who neglect earthly duty in pursuit of psychic experience harm themselves. They exchange lawful growth for illusion and arrive unprepared for continuation. True preparation for life beyond death lies in upright living, not in altered perception. Chapter 25. Living without the need for extraordinary powers. Grounded presence and service is the highest attainment. The highest spiritual attainment is not the possession of unusual abilities. It is the absence of the need for them. When a human being stands firmly in the present, fulfills daily duties with care, speaks truthfully, thinks clearly, and serves willingly, life becomes whole. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be escaped. The desire for extraordinary powers often masks dissatisfaction with ordinary life. Yet it is precisely in the ordinary that lawfulness is tested and proven. Extraordinary experiences do not refine character, daily faithfulness does. The Grail Message calls humanity back from spectacle to substance. From curiosity to responsibility. From fascination with the unseen to reverence for the lawful. A life lived uprightly radiates peace. A person who lives thus becomes a quiet pillar in creation, unnoticed by the sensational world, yet invaluable in effect. This is the true psychic experience. To live so grounded, so clear, and so responsible that illusion loses all attraction. Part 6. Psychic Phenomena in the Present Age. Why this subject has become especially dangerous today. Humanity has entered a time in which illusion no longer remains without consequence. What once lingered as harmless curiosity now reacts sharply upon the inner life. Psychic fascination, when misunderstood, has therefore become more perilous than in earlier ages. Not because perception itself is forbidden, but because law is now pressing for maturity. This present age does not favor experiment, spectacle, or untested inner excursions. It demands clarity, responsibility, and grounded consciousness. Psychic phenomena, when pursued as escape, power, or identity, collide directly with this demand and therefore collapse inwardly, often painfully. Chapter 26. Escapism in a Time of Accountability. Avoiding earthly duty under the guise of spiritual power. Many are drawn to psychic phenomena not from clarity, but from dissatisfaction with ordinary life. Earthly responsibility feels heavy, discipline feels slow, service feels unrewarded. Psychic ideas then appear as a shortcut, an imagined elevation above struggle. In this lies the danger. The Grail Message makes clear that earthly life is not a distraction from spiritual development, it is its testing ground. Any teaching or practice that draws the human being away from concrete responsibility weakens rather than elevates the spirit. Psychic escapism today often wears refined clothing. I am too sensitive for this world. My mission is beyond material life. I operate on a higher frequency. Such statements frequently mask unwillingness to endure, to serve, to mature. The laws of creation do not release anyone from earthly duty because of inner impressions or claimed abilities. On the contrary, the more sensitive a person is, the greater the demand for grounding and uprightness. In this time, escapism does not float, it sinks. Chapter 27, Spiritual Curiosity versus Spiritual Maturity. Recognizing lawful guidance without sensationalism. Spiritual curiosity asks, what can I experience? Spiritual maturity asks, what is required of me? Psychic fascination belongs to the first question. The Grail Message directs firmly toward the second. True guidance does not arrive with drama, visions, or excitement. It arrives quietly as recognition of duty, correction of attitude, or clarity about the next necessary step. The immature soul seeks experiences, the mature spirit accepts responsibility. Psychic phenomena promise knowing without becoming. Lawful development insists on becoming before knowing. This is why many who pursue psychic experiences feel increasingly confused, drained, or internally divided. They reach outward for perception while neglecting inward purification. Yet perception without inner order produces distortion. In the present age, law withdraws support from curiosity and strengthens only seriousness. What once appeared as insight now dissolves into noise if not anchored in humility. Chapter 28, Acceleration of Consequences. Why misuse of perception now brings rapid correction. Earlier epochs allowed humanity longer delay between cause and effect. Today, that interval has shortened. Not as punishment, but as education. Psychic misuse, whether through manipulation, fantasy, ego display, or obsessive curiosity, now returns swiftly as inner unrest, emotional instability, or collapse of confidence. The law no longer permits prolonged wandering in half-awareness. This acceleration exposes motives. Those who sought perception for truth feel sobered and grounded. Those who sought power feel emptied and disoriented. The tightening of consequence serves separation. It reveals which souls are willing to let go of illusion and which cling to sensation. Thus psychic confusion today is not accidental, it is lawful correction. The quicker the collapse, the greater the opportunity for awakening, if humility follows. Chapter 29, Separation through Readiness. Why only the aligned can endure what is coming. The future does not belong to the gifted, the sensitive, or the visionary. It belongs to the upright. Readiness is not measured by how much one perceives, but by how faithfully one lives. The Grail Message emphasizes that inner alignment determines endurance, not extraordinary faculties. Psychic individuals who resist discipline, clarity, and grounding will not be able to stand in the coming era. Their sensitivity becomes liability when not guided by law. Conversely, those who live simply, serve quietly, and refine their motives, often unnoticed, develop an inner strength that needs no display. Thus separation occurs invisibly. Between curiosity and responsibility. Between fantasy and clarity. Between sensation and service. No external judgment is required. Each soul places itself. Chapter 30, The Call to Upright Presence. Living consciously in thought, feeling, and action. The final call of this age is not to expanded perception, but to upright presence. Presence means thinking truthfully, feeling purely, acting responsibly. When these align, perception unfolds naturally, without danger, without desire, without disturbance. Such perception does not seek expression, it serves silently. The Grail Message does not deny inner awareness. It redeems it from misuse. Psychic phenomena fade when presence deepens. Not because awareness diminishes, but because the soul no longer needs signs, it stands in certainty. In this time, the highest spiritual act is not to see beyond the world, but to stand fully within it, awake, grounded, and responsible. Part 7. Liberation from Psychic Fantasy. Returning to law, balance, and reality. This final part does not attack psychic belief, it outgrows it. Liberation comes not through denial, but through clarity and maturity. What falls away here is not truth, but illusion. Chapter 31. Letting go of sensationalism. Sensationalism thrives where inner insecurity exists. The hunger to see, know, or experience what lies beyond the ordinary often arises from dissatisfaction with the simplicity of lawful living. The extraordinary appears attractive because the ordinary demands faithfulness, patience, and responsibility. Psychic sensationalism promises quick elevation without inner transformation. It offers experiences without character, impressions without discipline, and excitement without consequence. This is why it captivates many, and why it ultimately disappoints all. In the light of the Grail Message, it becomes clear that truth never seeks attention. It does not shout, impress, or dramatize itself. Truth works quietly, lawfully, and persistently within the soul. The more a person seeks sensation, the less receptive they become to genuine inner guidance. Letting go of sensationalism is not loss, it is relief. It frees the human being from restless curiosity and returns strength to inward stillness. When the desire to experience something special fades, the capacity to live rightly awakens. Only then can perception purify itself. Chapter 32. Accepting earthly life as the true field. Earthly life is not an obstacle to spirituality, it is its appointed field. The belief that truth lies elsewhere devalues the very place where responsibility is meant to unfold. Psychic fantasy often portrays the physical world as crude, dense, or inferior. This error leads people to neglect duties, relationships, and honest work while chasing invisible realms. In doing so, they turn away from the very conditions necessary for growth. The Grail Message teaches that no human being is placed on earth by accident. Each incarnation carries exact conditions suited for the soul's development. Family, work, environment, limitations, and opportunities are all part of lawful preparation. To accept earthly life fully is an act of humility and strength. It means saying yes to the present task, the present responsibility, and the present moment. It means recognizing that elevation is not found by escaping the world, but by standing upright within it. Only those who honor the earthly can mature spiritually. Chapter 33. Standing fully grounded in the now. The present moment is the only point where the human spirit can act. Past and future exist as consequence and possibility, but now is where responsibility lives. Psychic fantasies often pull consciousness away from the present. Some dwell on imagined past lives, others chase visions of future events. In both cases, the human being becomes absent from the only place where growth is possible. Grounded presence is not dullness, it is clarity. It sharpens perception, stabilizes feeling, and disciplines thought. A grounded person is awake, attentive, and inwardly calm. Such a person does not need visions to feel meaningful, life itself speaks clearly. Standing fully in the now requires courage. It removes the comfort of illusion and replaces it with accountability. But it also brings peace, because no energy is wasted chasing shadows. In the present moment, the human being stands directly before the law. Chapter 34. Using perception lawfully and prudently. Perception is not a toy, it is a responsibility. Every human being perceives inwardly to some degree, through intuition, conscience, and quiet knowing. This perception is lawful when it remains humble, grounded, and obedient to moral clarity. Problems arise when perception is forced, exaggerated, or pursued for self-importance. Then imagination mixes with intuition, and distortion replaces guidance. Lawful perception never contradicts conscience. It never demands admiration. It never bypasses responsibility. The Grail Message makes clear that true insight increases humility, not pride. It leads to service, not display. It strengthens character, not curiosity. Using perception prudently means testing impressions against truth and responsibility, remaining anchored in daily duties, never acting on impressions that flatter the ego or diminish others. Where these conditions are absent, perception must be restrained, not explored. Chapter 35. Peace through upright living and service. The highest state attainable by the human being is not psychic ability, it is inner peace born of upright living. When thought is clean, feeling is disciplined, and action is faithful, harmony arises naturally. No visions are needed, no special experiences are sought. Life itself becomes meaningful. Service replaces spectacle. Duty replaces display. Faithfulness replaces fascination. In such a life, psychic fantasy loses all attraction. The human being no longer seeks escape, because reality is no longer burdensome. Responsibility becomes light, and existence becomes purposeful. Peace is not achieved by knowing more, it is achieved by living rightly. And this peace is the surest sign of alignment with law. Closing reflection of Part 7. Liberation from psychic fantasy does not come through argument, fear, or suppression. It comes through maturity. When the soul grows strong enough to stand upright in reality, illusion dissolves on its own. The human being does not lose anything real. Only what was never true to begin with. Conclusion. Psychic phenomena as law, not fantasy. Psychic phenomena have long been treated as mysterious powers, rare gifts, or gateways into hidden worlds. In truth, they are none of these. When rightly understood in the light of the Grail Message, what humanity calls psychic phenomena is revealed to be nothing more than lawful effects of inner condition, never independent abilities to be pursued or displayed. True insight does not arise from curiosity, emotional excitement, or the desire to see beyond others. It arises from inner discipline, humility, and alignment with the laws of creation. Where these are present, perception unfolds naturally and quietly. Where they are absent, imagined experiences, misinterpretations, and self-deception flourish. Freedom does not come from seeing more, knowing more, or experiencing more unusual states. Freedom comes from clarity, from knowing one's place, task, and responsibility in creation. Curiosity that reaches beyond lawful limits weakens the human being instead of elevating him. It draws attention away from the only place where real growth occurs: daily life, conscious action, and moral responsibility. The upright human being no longer seeks psychic phenomena. He recognizes that whatever must be known will come through lawful intuition at the right moment, without force or desire. By living fully present, illusions lose their power, and imagination no longer masquerades as truth. Psychic phenomena, stripped of fantasy, return to their rightful place: effects, not goals; consequences, not attainments. Epilogue. The end of spiritual fantasy. Humanity stands at a turning point where illusion can no longer be tolerated. The coming time does not support escapism, whether through material excess or spiritual fantasy. What once lingered without consequence now collapses quickly under the tightening of law. Mystical self-deception is falling away. Teachings built on sensation, power-seeking, or ego-driven abilities lose their influence because they have no foundation in responsibility or service. The age of spiritual entertainment is ending. Only the grounded and upright endure. Not those who claim special insight, but those who live quietly in alignment with law. Not those who seek to escape the world, but those who fulfill their duties within it. Real spiritual influence is stable, sober, and service-oriented. It strengthens others without drawing attention to itself. It does not impress, it uplifts through example. What remains is simple: live rightly, think clearly, feel purely, and act responsibly. Everything else fades. Appendix. Practical tools for lawful inner development. Meditations for grounding and clarity. Begin each day with a brief period of inner stillness. Not to seek visions or impressions, but to quiet desire and align intention. Let attention rest on gratitude, responsibility, and readiness to serve. True grounding begins with humility. Exercises to distinguish imagination from intuition. When an inner impression arises, do not act on it immediately. Observe whether it brings calm clarity or emotional excitement. Lawful intuition is quiet, objective, and free of urgency. Imagination presses, flatters, or frightens. Daily practices for conscious presence. Perform ordinary tasks, work, conversation, rest, with full attention. Avoid distraction and mental wandering. Presence strengthens discernment and weakens fantasy more effectively than any spiritual exercise. Reflections on responsibility and inner discipline. At day's end, review thoughts, feelings, and actions. Ask, did I act uprightly? Did I avoid self-importance? Did I fulfill my duties where I stand? Correction begins with honest recognition, not self-condemnation. Weekly review for balance, humility, and lawful growth. Once a week, reflect on whether your spiritual understanding is making you more grounded, more patient, and more useful. If not, reassess direction. True growth simplifies life, it does not complicate it. Final word. Psychic phenomena are not doors to higher worlds. They are mirrors reflecting inner condition. When the human being lives rightly, nothing extraordinary is needed. Creation responds lawfully. And peace follows naturally. This is the Grail Message's correction, and its liberation.